นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings to you all. Today we begin a meditation retreat. Thanks to the kindness of Peter and Darren and Wenjia and the other volunteers from the Buddha Dhamma Foundation in Singapore who kindly helped to arrange it as a Zoom retreat. As you know, this is the time of the year when the monastic Sangha go into a 3-month retreat. So this is the first week of our 3-month retreat, so it fits nicely to have an online retreat because many people would like to practice but maybe still have commitments, have to be at home for work or family commitments, but would still like to bring the Dhamma into their lives. And so with the modern technology, we can do our best to give you some Dhamma, beam it into your home, give you some reminders and encouragement in your practice. The 3-month range retreat is always begun with just before, it's with the full moon day, Asalaha Puja, which is the day we remember the Buddha's teaching of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. You might say this is a perfect sutta for studying, learning, reciting and reflecting on for a retreat time. Because the Buddha lays out the basic problems that faces us as human beings, that we still have stress and suffering in our life. We're still bound up with the world, living in the world, and as we know, the world is full of difficulties, challenges, complications, sometimes down and out and straightforward suffering, sometimes more subtle suffering. But we all have to face that. And perhaps it was the Buddha's intention that he gave his first teaching at this time that became the beginning of the annual range retreat for monastics, where he laid out the Four Noble Truths, where he taught what is suffering, and gave an explanation of that just to help us reflect. What is the cause of suffering? What is the cessation of suffering? And then what is the path leading to the cessation of suffering? And then he encouraged his disciples from then onwards to practice this, to reflect on it and practice, which is what we're doing right here. We have this opportunity now to, whether we're in the monastery or at home, to practice. And the Buddha's teachings really encourage us to practice the Dhamma. It's a term my teacher Ajahn Kalyano used to use all the time, say Padibat Tham, practice the Dhamma. That's actually a shortened or abbreviated phrase. It's practice the Dhamma for the way out of suffering, or practice the Dhamma that leads out of suffering. It's the full term. You might say that's the 4th Noble Truth that the Buddha explained when he gave us this first teaching. And that's what the Buddhist teachings are really. They're a way out of suffering, or a pathway. We call it magga, which means path or way. And a path or a way is something you have to move along, follow along, in order to get from A to B, to get from where you are now, to get to the end of the pathway, which for practice terms is the end of suffering. But it requires movement, requires action. That's important because many people will view Buddhism, like any other religion, as something you just kind of believe in or you don't believe in. Say in Australia, where I live, there are many different religions practiced. It's a multicultural society. When people meet each other, they often say, well, what religion are you, if any? And some people are non-believers, obviously, atheists or agnostics, or maybe haven't even thought about it. But people tend to see religion in terms of what you believe in. So they say, you're a Buddhist, what do you believe in? And that may form a part of what we're doing. Belief certainly can be a useful thing to start with in the practice, but it's not the whole of the practice. The Buddha encouraged us to actually take what we believe in. We believe in the Buddha as an enlightened teacher. We take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. So we do practice from a place of belief, but then to put it to the test through the practice. And not just sit with the belief. That's like sitting at the beginning of this pathway. I believe that the Buddha was enlightened. I believe that the Dhamma is the way to practice out of suffering. I believe that. But then not actually going and practicing means you'll just sit at the beginning of your pathway. You won't actually get to where you want to get to, which is the end of suffering. And you can see that's one of particularly a more modern problem for humans now. If you hear the science, you hear the commentary on modern humanity, modern humanity's problems. One of the problems is we're becoming more and more sedentary as individuals. We spend a lot more time these days just sitting in front of a screen, and I know you're sitting in front of a screen now, so I'm not criticizing that, but it's more and more part of our life. So we tend to just sit there and absorb information from screens, communications, and our society really pushes us to favour all kinds of conveniences and comforts. So most people in the world live in urban areas, in cities, towns, villages. We live in houses which are becoming more and more comfortable with air conditioning and furniture and entertainments and all kinds of comforts. And even now, since COVID, a lot of people are working from home. So even if you have a job, you work, often you're working from home, again, in front of a screen, keeping in touch with the world. And this is bringing certain problems because more and more people, we have more to eat. And then if we sit in front of a screen, sometimes we're putting on weight, or we're just becoming living an unhealthy life. We don't exercise enough, maybe. Become more sedentary, more passive. And sometimes it's unconscious. We don't even realize it's happening until maybe some of the problems, health problems and mental problems also start to emerge. Even our entertainment and recreation nowadays is often sort of sitting in front of a screen, playing games or social media or just surfing the net, whatever. So that tends to be the way of life now for many people, more and more. In terms of Buddhist practice, well, there is a role to play for sitting there. As we'll see, we're learning to meditate today on this retreat, and that involves sitting, but it also involves walking. And we practice walking meditation as well. And the Buddhist path involves different aspects. practice of dana, generosity, compassion, doing things, but doing things mindfully with the precepts, and practicing upholding various qualities in our heart as we go about our daily life. But it doesn't mean just sitting there all the time. It also means engaging with the world, but with the qualities of the Dhamma in our heart as we do that. So if we really want to understand what the Buddha was teaching and experience at least partially the end of suffering, we have to act. We have to do things. The Buddha didn't just teach us to be passive and sit there and do nothing. Even when we are sitting there, we're not doing nothing, we're working with our mind, we're training, we're cultivating the path in all postures, whether we're sitting, standing, walking, and even lying down is part of the practice. Lying down with mindfulness, lying down with the attitude of one who is practicing the Dhamma. Say before you go to sleep, or when you're ill or exhausted and you're lying down, it can still be part of the practice. I often quote the lady who was in hospital in Melbourne, who was very ill, bedridden in hospital, but she's a faithful Buddhist, and she was feeling depressed because she felt lying in a hospital bed, unable to get up, made her practice it made it impossible for her to practice the Dhamma. And particularly she was somebody who was fond of chanting and found that very inspiring to chant, recite puritas and suttas. But she felt because she could only lie in bed doing nothing, as it were, that she couldn't chant, she couldn't practice. So she rang me up and I said, well, you can still practice. You don't have to get up to chant even. If you're still able to recite words, whether in your own language or in Pali, in the lying down posture in a hospital bed, you can still do that. You may not have much sound, you just do it softly. You may be able to raise your hands in Anjali as you're lying down, or maybe not. But you can still practice. You can practice mindfulness of breathing as you lie down, and so on. You can reflect on the Dhamma, you can listen to Dhamma, and you can reflect as you're lying there. So even in the lying down posture, if it's required that you lie down through tiredness or illness, you can still practice the Dhamma. So the Buddha was encouraging us to put this path of practice into action, cultivate it consciously, whatever posture, whatever activity, whether in a monastery or at home, as many of you are. Whether you're at work, you can still practice the Dhamma, cultivate the path. Whether you're lying in a hospital bed towards the end of your life, you can still practice the Dhamma. And maybe you should practice the Dhamma because it will bring you the rewards, the benefits. We don't practice the Dhamma for no real reason or just out of habit. We do it because it brings us happiness, freedom from suffering. That's what freedom from suffering means, isn't it? It means peace, happiness, inner peace, happiness in our minds, and whatever else is going on in the world. So, many people, they like to ask me and other Buddhist teachers, they say, oh, how do we practice Buddhism in such a confusing world? There's so many problems we hear about in the world today. How do we still practice Buddhism? Well, the whole point is that this is a path that you can practice in any situation, at any time, and it will bring you its results. Buddhist practice is based on the idea of karma, cause and result. So if you want to experience the end of stress, suffering, you want to experience happiness, that comes through causes. And the Buddha would say the causes are putting these principles of practice, the ways of practice, into action in your daily life. Learning how to listen to the Dhamma. Even just listening to the Dhamma, we have to learn how to do that mindfully, paying attention, with respect. The Buddha always said respect the Dhamma because it can lead you out of suffering. As we know, in the time of the Buddha, people listening to Dhamma talks could become enlightened. It's that important. Just learning how to listen to the Dhamma is a good starting point, because that's how we get the instructions to further our practice, to move along this path that the Buddha explained. Everyone thinks nowadays it's not going to happen, nobody's going to get enlightened listening to a talk, but talks can still be enlightening. Reading Dhamma books, listening to talks, if you're in the right frame of mind, there's a chance you learn something or deepen your understanding. Something that you hadn't seen before may become apparent to you while you're listening. Or certainly, in this day and age, many people gain samadhi listening to the Dhamma. That much I do know because I've had that experience myself, and I know many others who listen to the Dhamma of Luang Por Chah or any other teacher who they have faith in, and you listen to the teacher maybe straight away or over time listening to a talk, your mind can go into a state of calm. The 5 hindrances, or the kind of mental confusion that normally bothers us, the cravings, the aversions, the sleepiness, the worries and doubts, they all can drop away just through the purity of the Dhamma and the faith that arises, and then the effort you make to pay attention and listen to the Dhamma. It can put you in a very peaceful, calm state of mind, ripe for reflecting and seeing and understanding the Dhamma. Sometimes it's even beyond your control, in the sense that sometimes the Dhamma practice, everything comes together when the conditions are right, when the causes and conditions are right. Your mind may become peaceful in samadhi, whether that's in formal meditation, sitting, walking meditation, or listening to talk, or chanting, reciting suttas and parittas. When everything is right, then your mind can enter samadhi. And there's not much you can do about it either. There was one time I was translating a Dhamma talk for Luang Por Anand many years ago, maybe 30 years ago. It's one of the duties I did when I was a young monk. I used to assist Luang Por Anand translate his talks from Thai into English. And his talk was so good that as I was listening, my mind went into samadhi. And then I couldn't hear the talk anymore. But that was a problem because I was the translator. So at the end of his talk, I had to turn to him and say, "Can you repeat that?" Because I couldn't remember a single word, because my mind had gone into a deep state of samadhi and I hadn't been able to remember anything he said. He got used to that, so sometimes he'd even point out while I was in samadhi listening to his talk, trying to prepare myself to translate, I'd gone into samadhi. Ajahn Kalyano would tell the audience, he said, "Oh, he's not going to be able to translate, he's just gone into samadhi." And that's the benefit of a teacher who has skill. They even know where you're at in your practice. So sometimes it happens like that. Or even on a recorded talk. Myself and many other monks I know have been listening to, say, an Ajahn Chah talk on a recording, because obviously he passed away many years ago, and gone into samadhi, just listening to the Dhamma. It happens. Ajahn Chah used to say, if you're listening to a Dhamma talk and your mind becomes calm and serene and peaceful, enjoy it, just accept it. It happens, and maybe there's nothing you can do about it. Just enjoy it, and Then he said, when you're in a state of calm, listening to a Dhamma talk, it doesn't matter if you don't hear the words anymore. You're not listening to the Dhamma simply to remember the words. You're listening to the Dhamma to stimulate the path, the qualities of the path, sila, samadhi and panya, wisdom. And once your mind becomes calm as you listen to a Dhamma talk, then you just listen with your heart. And maybe it's not so much the words at that point, maybe it's just how you feel, the presence of mind and the various factors of samadhi that arise, the happiness, the rapture, physical calm and mental calm, the lightness or weightlessness of body and mind can happen. Ajahn Chah said the first time he heard Luang Por Mans give a Dhamma talk, he'd actually been walking all day to get to the monastery where Luang Por Man lived. This is like back in the 1940s, so 80 years ago. In those days, and even when I was a young monk, when you went to visit another monastery or a teacher in another monastery, often you had to walk. There's no car. So the walking could be quite a joyous walk because you're going for a good purpose to meet a teacher, but physically it'd be very draining, exhausting, walking in the heat of the day. So Ajahn Chah had been walking all day and he got to Luang Por Man's monastery. Physically he was tired, but mentally he was alert and happy to be there. And he listened to Luang Por Man's Dhamma talk, and he said all the weight of his body, the physical suffering of having walked all day, being tired, hungry, disappeared. His body became completely weightless, light, happy, listening to the Dhamma. And that's the power of the Dhamma. Just in the very beginning, hearing the Dhamma can uplift you and push you along your way, give you a nudge along this path towards the end of suffering. Even if that state of samadhi or the happiness, the brightness of mind doesn't last, it doesn't matter. It's giving you already an insight into the peaceful mind. The taste of Dhamma is a taste like no other taste in the world. Nowadays we're so obsessed with sense objects that we make a lot out of taste. The taste of food, taste of drink. We write books on food and recipes and about different kinds of drinks, and we have TV programs and so on based on the tastes that the world can offer us. But these are all the tastes of sensuality that lead to more craving and attachment if we're not careful. The taste of Dhamma is complete opposite. The taste of Dhamma takes you out of craving and attachment to a place of peace, clarity, insight, and helps you to remove suffering from your experience. So it's got to be the sweetest, the best kind of taste of all, which is what the Buddha used to say. The taste of Dhamma is the highest, the best, most profound taste. So when you listen to a Dhamma talk with mindfulness, pay attention and then reflect on it, you're getting a taste of Dhamma, and you may get an experience of peace or some understanding that you didn't have before, seeing something in a new light. Another way he said it's like having something that was previously like a pot that was upside down on the ground, having it turned upwards so you can see what's in it. Or your hand was turned one way and then you turning your hand over so you can see the other side of your hand. Hearing the Dhamma talk gives you a new insight into your experience. So listening to the Dhamma is an important part of the practice. But it's not an end in itself. It's not just so that we believe that the Dhamma is good, believe in the Buddha. That may be your starting point. But the idea is to listen so that you go off and practice more for yourself. And Ajahn Chah used to make this point. He used to say, you practice the Dhamma so that you can give yourself a Dhamma talk. He didn't want people just to attach to his Dhamma talks. And we love to quote Ajahn Chah, listen to him, read him, because his talks are very good. They're very profound and full of inspiration and clear insights into the truth. They can be very helpful. But he didn't teach for us just to attach to his talks, his words. He said, you've got to learn how to give a Dhamma talk to yourself. Be your own teacher. So one of his favourite phrases was, Atahi atano nato. One has to learn to be a refuge to oneself. We begin our practice taking refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. But then the idea is to start putting the teachings into practice and draw the qualities of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha into our own heart so that we know and see for ourselves through the practice. And knowing for yourself means learning to reflect on things. Reflect, contemplate the truth, see the truth, understand the truth for yourself. So Buddhism isn't just a belief system, a set of teachings that we say, I believe in or I don't. That's only the beginning. Hearing the Dhamma, taking refuge is the beginning, but then we have to go off and practice for ourselves. And that's why a retreat like this is such a good time, even when you're at home. It's a time when you can practice sitting meditation, walking meditation, chanting, listening to Dhamma at home, in a space you might normally not think of it as a place of practice. Normally at home we're thinking more of comforts and desires and moods and following along with the things we like to do. But a lot of the activities we do in the home, sometimes we're doing it with an attitude that it's nothing to do with the Dhamma. We see it as maybe more worldly duties, and sometimes that's reflected in our state of mind when we're at home. We have, where do all the arguments in the world happen? Well, largely at home. Where do we experience extreme emotions? Usually at home, extreme highs and excitements, extreme lows, sadness, depression. Often at home, we're at prey to our attachments, our moods, and possibly suffer the most when we're at home, normally speaking. But now we're turning our home into a monastery, temporarily. We ourselves are all, say you, the laity, you're all taking temporary ordination. You've just taken the 8 precepts, you've committed to practice the Dhamma, you're turning yourself into a monastic, you're turning your home into a monastery, and now you can practice at home using the retreat as a guideline, a framework. Often we think, for our home to be blessed, we've got to bring Sangha, monastics, into our home. And I know many people find it a joyful thing when they invite monks and nuns to their home to chant, teach, be there, receive alms. Of course, that's a good thing, a good activity. But you can also bless your home through your own practice. Bring the blessings of the practice into your home, practicing mindfulness, practicing the precepts, developing right view, right understanding as you go about your business over the next few days. If the other people in your home and they're not practicing, they're working, going about their own business, well, that's fine. Just wish them well. That doesn't matter. The important thing is for you to take the practice on for this few days and use your time well. And you can get many things, many benefits from this practice. So maybe I'll leave the first talk there, and in a moment we'll give you some introduction to the practice of walking meditation, for 30 minutes, and then we'll come back and we have another sitting meditation session, but I'll leave this morning's talk there. So we have a period of 30 minutes walking meditation now. For those in the monastery, it's perhaps more straightforward because the place is set up for it. For you at home, it may present initially a few challenges. You've got to work out where are you going to practice your walking. And I would encourage you to use your time to learn how to do a bit of walking meditation in your own space at home. And even if you've got a small little room, it doesn't matter. You can still practice walking meditation for the next period of time. Because whether you have a big area to walk back and forth or just a few meters in a small room full of furniture, you can still do it. Ajahn Chah used to talk about the time when he was on a range retreat as a young monk, and he was stuck inside a tiny little kuti that was just 2 meters by 2 meters. And the rain would just not stop for days on end. It was just raining and raining and raining. And he needed to do walking meditation to change posture, stretch his limbs, and because it's also a good posture to practice mindfulness and reflect on the Dhamma. So he had the challenge of how to do it in a kuti 2 meters by 2 meters. So he walked from one corner to the other diagonally, the longest sort of distance available. He said he walked very slowly, carefully, bringing all his attention to his body, to the process of lifting the feet, stepping down on the floor of the room. Walked from one side to the other, turn around, walk back again for periods of time. And it's still a perfectly valid way to practice mindfulness. If you're walking very slowly in a confined space, so be it. And the aim is to be mindful of your body, the posture, the movement of the feet, the pressure of the feet touching the ground. That may be where you begin paying attention. Some people recite the word Buddho. That's how Luang Por Man, Luang Por Chah taught it. Recite Buddho as you walk back and forth, each footstep down, Buddho, Buddho, Buddho. You can try that. Some people just focus on the sensation of the foot touching the ground. So every time your mind wanders away, starts to think about other things, once you realize that you've lost your mindfulness, you bring your mind back to pay attention to the feet touching the ground. And you walk slowly or more quickly, depending on what's possible, what's comfortable for you in that place. You walk back and forth mindfully, paying attention to your posture, your body, the movement of the body, or reciting Buddho. And as you become more calm, more steady, maybe you also can contemplate the impermanence of the various sensations in the body that you feel, the impermanence of sense contact, sounds come and go, thoughts arise, pass away. As we meditate walking, we can also contemplate. So whether you are in a little room or a larger room, depending, this is now a time you can spend about 30 minutes walking and then come back and we'll have a session of sitting meditation. So we won't do any formal paying respects to the Buddha yet. We can just bow yourselves and then go off and do your walking meditation.